Yeah, this concept of ego, I think it's a very potent topic of conversation. And I think the thing that I find most interesting about it is kind of this meta thing about how people perceive that word and that idea, because I feel like people's individual definitions of it vary vastly. And I know that this ego ale thing you kind of mentioned before, that Eckhart Tolle, his writing and ideas have really played a role in your conception of ego. Isn't that's right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, and I remember when I first read his stuff kind of around 2019, like I think I had been introduced to his stuff maybe even in college through like some of the creative writing classes. But I never really paid too much attention to what I was assigned in terms of reading it, just all throughout school. And I didn't really get interested in reading myself until the end of college. But when I started taking it in on purpose, picked out his books, I think I didn't start with The Power of Now. I started with A New Earth. And yes. I remember the first like introduction of that. I was already into meditation and already into the concepts of consciousness and self and that kind of thing. But I definitely feel, even though I was familiar and had a meditation practice and felt like I had made strides in that kind of like stepping back from my ego and identifying what it is, I feel like there was an extra shift that took place just in hearing his words articulated so beautifully in that introduction of A New Earth. And the way he describes the concept of ego to me, as I understand it, which I think gave me a more clear, more functional, better idea of ego, which I don't think a lot of people think about ego this way. But it's pretty much, there is consciousness, self-awareness, and it's just the awareness and the experience in the present moment. Ego is everything else, essentially, as far as we're concerned as human beings. It is our physical form. It's all the contents of consciousness. I mean, it's ego. It not only is our thoughts and even our emotions, but it's also the physical matter which we interact with. So it's kind of like what I find so interesting about this concept of, because a lot of people talk about this thing that you're talking about in ego ale, where the artist has to step back from their ego and allow their creativity to flow through, essentially get their ego out of the way to allow something to be channeled through it. I don't know if I see it that way, though, because I feel with this Eckhart Tolle definition, artists, as we're talking about creating things, we are talking about manipulating material matter and creating different forms of media and maybe physical sculptures and paintings and things. And so I don't feel like it's necessarily this total exclusion or abandonment of ego, but I do feel like it is a collaboration with ego that doesn't necessarily come from a place of ego. Like, ego's not the driver of it. And I think that's what's being talked about when it's stepping back and getting out of the way, because you can have egoic motivations for making pieces of art, and a lot of times those pieces will fall flat and not resonate with people. But in these cases where artists will give recounts of this process, like, I don't know what happened, I just kind of like got out of the way and like I don't feel like I was in control. There was some force moving through me. But that, I think that's the point I was trying to make. What are your thoughts on, like, do you feel like ego is completely removed from the equation, or do you feel like it's not about ego death, it's about getting your ego to cooperate and take maybe second, like, passenger seat to this higher unified self?
Yeah.
I know that was a mouthful, but
it was. What do I think about the process of letting go ego? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about, just your thoughts outside of yourself and observing other artists, or just your own experience with making art. Do you feel like it's a collaborative effort with the ego, or do you feel like it's just
collaboration with your ego, really. Or even talking about A New Earth, I think that was my first introduction to Eckhart as well, because probably in like high school in like 2009, there was this musician called Pogo, and he like sampled some of his speeches in his music. So I was like, who is this man, this philosopher man? And then in The New Earth, also talking about like your idea processes, like even just having thoughts and knowing that your thoughts are like egoic. But I think with Ego L, yeah, I think it's exploring the collaboration that you have to deal with your ego. And then even just thinking about, like, for myself in like filmmaking and photography, that you have to let it go because you have to be present. And being present and looking through like your lens, observing the things around you, you can let go of your ego because you're not going to have motivation sometimes. Sometimes you just need to go out in the world and just shoot. And that's when something will come to you and it'll be just the right thing or just the right moment. And you're not always going to have those moments if you have intent behind the art of the lens sometimes.